Mr. Merrett, sir, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. For nearly 60 years, Judge, people of all ages, from infancy to dotage, in this country at least, have seen a movie, a thing that we almost all share in common as part of our fund of cultural heritage. The movie is The Wizard of Oz.
Oh, okay.
It's filled with images and with sayings that have become part of the fabric of our culture. But there's one particular scene in that movie that has acquired almost universal resonance. It's a touchstone. For when people, a touchstone.
Oh, okay.
For when people play games with us. And it's that moment in the movie when the little dog grabs the edge of the green curtain and pulls it back, exposing the charlatan. And the great and powerful Oz, the terrible visage suspended above the flames at the front of the room, says, "Ignore the man behind the curtain." Well, there's a reason that the great and powerful Oz said that. And the reason is that if you don't ignore the man behind the curtain, you find out that the great and powerful Oz, for all of his reputation, for all of the terror that he inspires, is nothing more than smoke and flickering lights. Well, Your Honor, I suggest to you that it is a similar motivation that caused Mr. Pope to open his remarks to you with the statement that we're past who these parties are. We're past what goes on. We're past right and wrong. We're past who's evil and who's good. If you take that advice, Judge, and you decline to look at the charlatan behind the curtain, what you ignore coming into this case is the very reason that you have 8 or 9 or 10 pages of criminal charges brought by Scientology, as to which they were able to adduce prima facie case of 5 incidents. After all this time, after 7 days of evidence, you missed that. You missed the fact that when you leaf back through the file, as I'm sure you will find not only that one of the process servers filed an affidavit saying that he acted at the direction of Kendrick Moxon, who is not an attorney in Florida, in serving process long before Ms. Coburn filed her appearance in the case. You'll also see that some of these same process servers filed other affidavits of service listing Mr. Pope's address as the address of Moxon and Coburn. If you don't look behind the curtain, Judge, you don't see the significance of that fact, because you don't see that Kendrick Moxon is an unindicted co-conspirator in a domestic spying ring. You don't see that there's a reason for his involvement in what has been presented to you. You don't see that there's a reason that Mr. Hertzberg has been flung into outer darkness and Mr. Moxon's partner brought in here to sit at council table. This is a special situation requiring special handling. So we have Moxon and Coburn brought in. Moxon, first of all. No appearance in this case by anybody in his firm, and he's not a lawyer, but he's all of a sudden in the case.
Excuse me, Your Honor, I'm going to have to interrupt counsel as much as I hate to do it, because he's arguing things that aren't in evidence. Mr. Hertzberg left because he had to go to Paris. He's arguing stuff that is totally outside the evidence, and I think you ought to be constrained to argue the evidence. He's got 2 issues. One is the camera episode as to himself, and the other is to Ms. Bazazzi and his client. And all the rest of this is totally outside the record.
Okay. Mr. Hertzberg went to Paris in the springtime?
He did.
I will point out to the court that the last time we were told why he left, it was New York. You'll probably remember that from the session in chambers.
Okay, go ahead. That's all right.
In any event, we have this sudden change of players in the course of the case and an invitation to ignore everything that you know about the people who are here, everything that you know about Scientology. And I'm not going to make this the theme of my remarks. So I'll put all of this up front and ask that you just keep it in mind, what came into evidence about Scientology and about what's going on here. Mr. Minton testified that part of Scientology's fair game, part of their doctrine with regard to critics is that all critics are criminals and that they are entitled to do anything to make that a fact. They are entitled to do anything to allow themselves to publicly proclaim, look, we told you, they're criminals. And I suggest to you, Your Honor, that includes coming in this courtroom and asking you to sign off on Hubbard's doctrine. They brought...
Whoa. Mr. Merrett. How do I get to Hubbard's doctrine from all the stuff we've had here for 10 days?
Well, you get there, I can tell you very easily how you get there. You get there because for everything that you've heard, everything that you see written on the paper, everything that you've heard from these witnesses, you don't have a single Scientologist coming in here saying, Judge, they got in my face, they bothered me, they interfered with me. You do have Ms. Winberg, but we'll deal with her at some length and in some detail. But other than that, all of this, viewed in the light most favorable to Scientology, is technical allegations with no actual effect on anybody who was intended to be protected by the injunction. The point of this is not to protect Scientologists or Scientology. The point of this is not to deter any conduct that's harmful to anybody. The point of this is simply at whatever cost to secure a conviction. Now, Mr. Bunker testified about that Bigot Watch website. Mr. Shaw was kind enough to tell us he runs it by correcting the spelling of the name of the website for us. And you recall he testified about it being pointed out to the court one day that there was a pleading from this case or an order that was on Bigot Watch before it was delivered to me, and that it was taken down that very day when the court was apprised of its presence. Judge, that's where your order is going if there's a conviction. That's the purpose of this. Is they want a document, they want a judgment of guilty to post on Bigot Watch so that they can tell everybody, see, we told you, they're criminals. Their lawyers are criminals. Tori Bazazian was one of us for 30 years, but she's a criminal. If she wasn't a criminal, she wouldn't be a critic.
Same objection, Your Honor. Now he's telling you with no evidentiary foundation, whatever, why it is we brought this thing and what we're going to do in the future. I mean, this is ridiculous.
I'll move on, Your Honor, simply noting that it is the gored ox that's bellows.
There he goes again.
That, Your Honor, is the basis for our presence here today. And I ask you again, look at the orders to show cause. Look for the allegation that anybody was injured. It's not there. Now, I want to talk first about Ms. Bazazian. Mr. Pope was loud and long and repeated in stating all she had to do was turn the sign upside down. That's all she had to do. Well, the first thing that we need to do, and I'm sure Mr. Pope will do this when he gets back up, is he'll read to you from the injunction where you explain how it is that you protect yourself when you have to move through a zone other than an orange zone and you have a picket sign in your possession. I'm sure he can do that, since he's very clear that any idiot could have figured that out. It is self-evident, and it's criminal not to have turned the sign upside down. Remember, Judge, that's what everything he says, he's saying that. It is criminal to do this. It is criminal not to do this. His allegation to you is that is so clear that not turning the sign upside down when you walk from the LMT down Fort Harrison Avenue toward the Fort Harrison Hotel, that keeping them upright instead of inverted is a crime. And he's telling you that because she kept them in her hands upright when she came back the other way, it is so self-evident that all you got to do is turn them upside down, that not turning them upside down is a crime. Now, Mr. Pope was careful to point out to you, Your Honor, that Ms. Bazazian was present when that police lieutenant was explaining the injunction to people. I want you to watch, if you will.
Let's do what we said we're going to do and let the people be able to see. Go ahead.
Now, listen carefully what the police lieutenant says, Your Honor.
This conduct, this order applies to picketing. We're not keeping you from your free travels to travel anywhere you want to go within the city of Clearwater, as long as you're not picketing in that travel.
One last question. I'm going to get out of here and leave you alone.
Right.
I was given this by a picketer. If I wear this, am I going to be construed as picketing?
No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
This is picketing. This is picketing.
You've been very, very clear.
This is a picket, okay?
Your Honor, it's important that you catch what this officer is doing as he talks. And what you saw there, Your Honor, is Mr. Henson standing with his signs inverted, just like Mr. Pope wants him to do, and a police lieutenant touching the sign saying, this is picketing, this is picketing, this is a picket. And the signs are upside down. And Ms. Bazazian was standing right there.
Okay, now stop there just a minute, please, sir. Okay, are you gonna be putting on any more video?
I probably will, but maybe just as well, unless the court is more comfortable with the bench. It doesn't matter to me. So where we find ourselves, Judge, is that even if Scientology had equipped Ms. Bazazian to read minds, she was still confronted with a police officer telling her that standing there with the sign upside down was picketing, which leaves her with the question, and it's not a big deal if you're applying reason rather than prejudice, is how you get from one orange zone to another. How you get from one place where you have a right to be with a picket sign to another place that you have a right to be with a picket sign when the entire area is on the maps attached to the injunction and parts of your necessary path are not orange. And what she did was move directly and continuously from her point of origin to her destination. She picketed and then she went back. You don't see her making a circuit up and down the west side of the Clearwater Bank building with her signs. You don't see her standing in place near the Clearwater Bank building, except for the time that she's talking to the police officer, the female police officer. You don't see her doing any of that. Now, Mr. Pope made a big point of accusing the critics, particularly including Ms. Bazazian, of gameplay. Now, clearly, as a matter of logic, it must be possible, since the court did not prohibit picketing, it must be possible to move from one place to another in possession of your picket signs. Now, it's not lawful, and it is not in obedience to the court order, if you picket in those proscribed areas. The question is, are we playing games? Have you seen abuse? Judge, what is the hot button place? What is ground zero for picketing? Where was it that you saw Bob Minton when we were in the original trial of this case being swarmed by dozens of Scientologists who miraculously appeared out of nowhere 10 minutes after he started picketing? Where was all that? It's in front of the Fort Harrison Hotel. Not the in front of that some Scientologists swore to was actually across the street, but the real in front of the Fort Harrison, right there on the sidewalk outside the front doors. That's the place, Judge. That's where the pickets were going on beforehand. That's where the trouble that led to the entry of the injunction came from. Now, Mr. Pope has attributed a great deal of malicious cleverness to the critics, including Ms. Bazazian. They're playing games, they're pushing the limits. You know what, Judge? If he was right, there's something you would have heard that you didn't hear. What you would have heard is a Scientologist saying, yes, Your Honor, that's the videotape of Tory Bazazian walking across in front of the Fort Harrison outside the front door with a picket sign. And then you would have heard Tory Bazazian saying, but Judge, I was just trying to get to the orange area around on Pierce Street. If there was game playing, Judge, unless you adopt a judicial finding that the critics are all nitwits, if there was game playing, it would have been to some desired end or desired effect. It would have been to engage in actual picketing at a meaningful location, which would otherwise have been proscribed. One doesn't play games, one doesn't pull the court's nose by picketing alongside a blind wall down Fort Harrison Avenue. There's just no way. If this was game playing, if this was bogus, if this was made up, you would have seen picketing directly in front of the Fort Harrison Hotel, and then you would have heard the excuse, Judge, I was just trying to get to a legal place. I was going to picket in front of the courthouse. I was headed to Pierce Street. I was on my way to the covered walkway on the other side of Fort Harrison. But you didn't hear that. You don't see anything that even looks like anybody playing games or making up excuses or pulling the court's nose. What you see is somebody taking not necessarily the most direct route down Fort Harrison Avenue to a legal picketing area, but the route which is least likely to bring her into immediate contact with Scientologists. She testified, if you recall, if this is the Clearwater Bank building, and this is the Coachman building. She testified that she came down this side. Mr. Enerson described in great detail what's here, and the court noted that the court was familiar with that building. You've got about a third of the building is blank walls, a third of the building is windows that are about 10 feet off the ground, and the last third of the building is ordinary eye-level windows, but they're covered with window shades, which, according to the testimony that you heard, are always drawn. She moves continuously down here across the street, and she told you onto the Fort Harris, and then she came back. Now, that same day you have the incident in the driveway. And the allegation is, number one, that she failed to stay 10 feet back from the driveway, and number two, that she blocked the driveway. Now, if wishes were horses, then beggars would ride. If watches were turnips, I would wear one by my side. But none of those things is true. If Ms. Bazazian had blocked the driveway, she might well be in violation of the injunction. However, it is absolutely uncontroverted and not even admitted. Scientology has pretended throughout this proceeding like it simply didn't happen, that this UPS truck, as big as a house, drove through the supposedly blocked driveway. Nobody has, and I suspect it's because nobody can, attempted to resolve the tension between the driveway is blocked and the giant brown truck drove into the driveway. That's simply not possible. And you see it on both views. And one thing the court needs to be aware of when watching these videotapes is that you have reverse angles from two different spy cameras. You see it first from the Fort Harrison down here, and then you see it from the Coachman building. And in each instance, you see the UPS truck swinging into the driveway, big as life, visible to everybody except whoever swore out this order to show cause, claiming that the driveway was blocked. You have only Mr. Avila's uncorroborated testimony that a van was stopped in the street. Now, the interesting thing is, if you watch the videotape, you can see the right rear corner of the van in question disappear past the back of the green car. Now, I don't know where it went, but it is not on the videotape. If you look, there is not a shadow of it on the videotape, and manifestly, the van does not stop in a position that would indicate that it was waiting for the green car to move. If it stopped someplace further north, out of the field of view of the camera. And if it stopped because the driver is incompetent. Because, remember, Judge, this evidence was adduced. The vans are smaller than a UPS truck. If this van exists, if this van stopped, the only reason it can have stopped is because Scientology uses drivers who can't put a standard-sized van in a hole that a gigantic UPS truck will fit through. Which means that the problem is not anything Ms. Bazazian did, but rather a lack of competence on the part of the driver. The bottom line, however, Judge, is that you cannot, with any application of logic or common sense, declare that a driveway which can be transited by a UPS truck is blocked. Now, with regard to her coming within 10 feet, actually, let me back up just a second. What I would like to review with you for just a moment, I think it's become obvious, Scientology can lay its hands on its people with this Ms. Winberg's sudden appearance. I'd like to review for you briefly the testimony of the van driver who was blocked out in the street. We're done now. You don't remember him testifying either, I take it. It's because they didn't present it.
No, he had on that attractive Hawaiian shirt. Come on, let's go, John.
If that had happened, it would have been easy enough to produce him. And the fact is, the driveway was not blocked. Obviously, she is, when talking to the driver or passenger in the car, whoever she was talking to, within 10 feet of the driveway, within 10 feet of the opening. However, she testified, and it is uncontroverted, that she was there because she was summoned by the driver, that the car stopped first and called her over while she was in transit, If you watch the timestamp on the tape, you'll see that the conversation is, I think, 46 seconds. She testified she didn't initiate the conversation. And she testified she clearly, and it's obvious, you talked to her on the stand, Judge. Her intent was not to violate the injunction. Her intent was evidently not to be rude to the people who stopped in the driveway. And as Mr. Pope pointed out to you at the beginning of these proceedings, that intent is a necessary element. I think you can safely assume from her having been here that that ain't going to happen again, regardless of who stops in the driveway and calls to her. But Judge, you had the opportunity to observe her demeanor, to talk to her essentially in a free association environment. And Judge, you know, just like everybody else in this room knows, that there was never any intent to violate the injunction. And she never blocked the driveway. Now, that essentially takes care of the specific instances regarding Ms. Bazazzi. With regard to the spy camera incident, that brings us to the man behind the curtain. And it brings us to the fact that it is only by considering who it is behind that curtain that you can make sense of what happened yesterday when this witness was dredged up and poured out in front of the court. Now, I want to review with you first her testimony, which, as Mr. Howey pointed out, was not rebuttal of anything. First off, what she testified to was that the door, which is to the left of a viewer from the street, remains locked. It is the other door, the northernmost of the double doors, that can be opened. That was her testimony. And if you watch on the videotape, you'll see that, in fact, this door, the one on which I wrote while she was testifying, opened this door. This is the door that was open, the northernmost door.
By her.
No, the door that she claims to have opened, yes.
Right. Yeah, not the bread man.
Correct. That's what she says. However, you see it open and close, thus verifying that the northernmost door is the unlocked door on the videotape. Now, a rule that I was taught early on is that if you can't beat the truth out of a witness, you at least nail them down. You can always accomplish that. Well, given what I was given to work with, what I was stuck with was nailing her down. Now, let's look at what she saw when she tells you that she stepped out that door. And the reason this is critical, Judge, is because the events that she tells you she saw pin it down to a specific instant. And we can look at the videotape and see what was happening at that instant. If you remember, Mr. Minton testified in a rebuttal that the events that she testified to did happen, but they happened only one time, and they're on the videotape. She testified that Mr. Minton was stopped at the time she looked out the door, which she said she opened all the way 90 degrees out. Remember that. Mr. Minton was stopped halfway up the ladder taking pictures. When Mr. Howey examined her, she testified that Mr. Minton's back was to her. Mr. Minton testified that there was, in fact, a point during which he had his back to the ladder, that is, that he was facing north, while taking pictures, and that happened once. She also testified that she saw me in my dark outfit and that she saw a policeman. So we know that all of this occurred, the time that she says she opened the door fully to its 90-degree extension, occurred at a moment when Mr. Minton was halfway up the ladder, facing north, and I was standing at the foot of the ladder, wearing a dark outfit, and there was a policeman there. Well, first off, Judge, I was wearing the only clean shirt I own, and it was white. It's not a dark outfit. But we'll leave that lay. You can just put that in appraising your memory overall. But you'll see on the video, there's no dark outfit. However, there is that moment when Mr. Minton is facing north on the ladder with a policeman there. And unfortunately for Ms. Winberg and whoever it is that fed her this story, you can see the top of the door.
Objection, Your Honor. There's not the first bit of evidence in here to support that kind of claim, whoever it is that fed her this story.
Oh,
it's just part of his wild hyperbole that he's so famous for. I'd like for him to stick to arguing the evidence and the inferences therefrom.
We can do that, Judge. You draw the inference. She never told a soul that she was anywhere around there at that time, but who popped up Sunday morning? OSA, to tell her the lawyers wanted to talk to her about December the 4th. She never told a soul about it, but OSA popped up. Then the next thing you know, she's talking to Mr. Moxon's partner. She's talking to Wally Pope, and she's in here testifying. So, Judge, I'll let you draw the inference after you see this videotape about where the story came from. And I would like to show it to you now, if I might. Where this picks up is you'll see the back of the policeman's head as he comes into the frame walking toward the ladder. You see the door close. You even hear it close.
Is that the bread truck to the right there?
Yes, sir. Here's the phone in the doorway.
Stop it just a minute.
Okay. Now what were you saying, sir?
You'll see the phone here, which is south of the doorway, and then this shadow here is the top of the doorway.